I'm going to talk about the healthcare and use of robots and autonomous systems. So robots and autonomous systems applications find a place in surgery, in rehabilitation, and in personal care as personal care robots. So they have been around for some time, and in the health sector, and the development has been motivated with technological developments for smart actuators, new materials, control, medical imaging, image processing software, but also with acceptance of robotic assistance both by patients and by clinicians. At the moment, robotic systems are, at least in medical area, is probably where the robots were about 30 years ago. So they are big and they are slow, they are very expensive, and still without very clear impact, wide impact in health. So in contrast to developed industrial robots that were for dull and dirty tasks and also safely caged, these robots are in very close interaction with humans. And this, as there's a great prospect in that, but there are also a lot of obstacles and lots of problems in having robots very close to humans in various things. So generally in healthcare, new technologies introduced either to improve what the clinicians are doing for the patient safety or to reduce the healthcare costs. And the healthcare providers are increasingly motivated to try to save where they can. There are other, of course, clinical or other social motivators for this, and one of them, which is now often spoken about, is a growth of elderly population in not only in UK but in the world, and assistive robots are becoming more and more interesting. So we are aware that all the any solutions that will empower the healthcare providers to keep people independent, living independently, will be very high on the agenda in the next decade or even longer. So they are providing long-term independent living and social care, certainly very interesting. In the surgery, there is definitely a shift from open surgery to minimally invasive surgery. So this has benefit for patients because they have less pain, there is less scarring. There is a benefit for health providers. There is the less hospital days because there's a faster healing. And some of the robots provide better dexterity for surgeons, especially in minimally general surgery as compared to traditional laparoscopic surgery. Then we have hospital robots. Hospital robots can reduce the number of staff inside in hospitals, but can still provide remote access from the experts, from the consultants that are not often in hospitals. Then we have, again, robotic rehabilitation, and this is, again, projected growth in critical illnesses and chronic illnesses, and lack of health specialists in this area. So we are looking at post-stroke rehabilitation, for instance, and similar rehabilitation activities. Another motivator for introducing robots and robotic devices in healthcare is, of course, market. And there is, of course, for UK to be competitive in the market, it has to innovate. Most of the companies at the moment that are popular, that are big on the medical robotics market, are from United States or from elsewhere in the world. UK government, somebody has already mentioned this, has recognized robotics and autonomous as one of the 8 great technologies. So there is now increasing investment in this area. Of course, this is a lucrative market, and already this is projected to a very significant growth in the next decade for medical robots. So, to have a quick overview on what is currently, so what we are talking about. So, as opposed to others that we're talking about very specific applications, I'm going to mention quite a few of them that are currently on the market or getting increasingly popular. So as I mentioned already, minimally invasive surgery. So this Da Vinci robot from United States that has been on the market for the last 15 years. They have already sold a number of these robots and gone through the longer clinical trials to prove that outcomes for the patients are increasingly better. Then another, again from the United States, is Mako. These are the orthopedic surgical robots which improve joint replacement. So knee and hip joint replacements have improved precision with the robots that are really milling robots. And the milling robots improve that placement of artificial joints on the anatomy. Neuromate is, again, for neurosurgical operations, so placing electrodes deep in the brain or for taking biopsies. So both of these, the two robots, so Da Vinci is clearly teleoperated with the surgeon remote from the operating site. These two robots use pre-planning and medical imaging for controlled motion and execution of pre-planned trajectories. So slightly more autonomous is CyberKnife, which is again a large robotic arm that can deliver radiotherapy to a precise location of the tumor. So all of these robots are really developed from traditional robotic industrial arms, and they are adapted robots in medical applications. So traditionally, they're using the expertise in terms of motion and control from the industrial robots, and in combination with medical imaging, they have moved into the medical application. There are rehabilitation, so not all robots look like robotic arms, industrial robotic arms. So we have new generation of prosthetics. So rehabilitation, especially financed by American Army, has actually moved very quickly to intelligent prosthesis. So this one is the latest from Osser. These prosthetics can actually learn and adapt to the natural gait of the user. So it is state-of-the-art, not only because it was used now by Oscar Pistorius, but because it's one of the best at the market. So the prosthetic of hands, so this one, again, very anthropomorphic looking, and it is driven by muscle sensors to actually create almost everyday activity grasps. And then post-stroke rehabilitation robots, so with about 100,000 new strokes each year, post-stroke rehabilitation is extremely time-consuming and expensive. So having robots like this one, and this research is going very fast, is to wearable robots to provide repetitive motion for rehabilitation of the consequences of the stroke. Then we have assistive and hospital robots. I already showed this one, but this one is interesting because it's recently been approved by FDA. It's a fully autonomous robot for hospital, and it is already in use there. Then we have new generations of personal care robots. So with, as I said, with increasing growth of elderly population, we have increasing need for both cognitive and also physical assistance for elderly people. So most of these robots, so this robot is developed in Germany, they're developed in Japan, this is a Japanese robot, and then with motorized orthosis for lifting and moving the patient around. So where about is autonomy in all of these robots? So most of the robots that I showed are not autonomous, especially surgical ones. They are fixed, pre-controlled robots, usually with real-time medical image feedback. And autonomy is something that is coming slowly, but also it's very controlled in which area actually will have autonomy. So autonomy is something that distinguishes automated from autonomous machines. And for this, what is the most critical is actually decision making. So if the surgical robot, for instance, have to make decision, it will have to, let's say, detect a specific anatomy. So it will detect a blood vessel. It will have to detect if it's bleeding, and it will have to make a decision to stop the bleeding. So this would be a fully autonomous. I'm using this autonomy levels for unmanned systems framework, which was defined by National Institute of Standards and Technology, that is taking 3 parameters in consideration. So it's not just the level of human-robot interaction and human input into the system, but it is also about complexity of the environment and complexity of the task that is in question. So here we're looking from basically control, which could be a manual, so fully manual control by human, and could be shared or supervised control up to the full autonomy. So then, as some of the speakers before said, the autonomy doesn't have to be one thing continuous in all circumstances. It can be variable, and it could be defined depending on other 2 factors. So depending on how dynamic is the environment or how complex is the task. So what this means for the medical robots, it means that we have, let's say, teleoperated, like Da Vinci robot, up to the personal care assistants and hospital robots, which have or are expected to have more autonomy. Environmental complexity, if you're looking at the surgical, depends on what kind of anatomy, again, we're talking about. For general surgery, definitely very complex. So some robots are a little bit higher on the scale of autonomy because their fixed anatomy is easier. So let's say orthopedic robots, the anatomy is more lends itself to pre-controlled rather than the teleoperation. Again, the task could be very simple, like biopsy taking, to brain prosthesis control or not tying with the surgical robot. So the tasks for surgical especially could be very complex, and what for humans are not so complex, for robots could be incredibly complicated tasks. So also, when we talked about the standards, there is a group now that is developing standards in UK that is part of the international effort organized by ISO. So this is the group of experts both from academia and from industry, and developing standards for service robots, and also a special group which is defining standards and defining levels of autonomy in medical robot applications, so from surgical to rehabilitation and so on. So they are quite active, and they started about 5-6 years ago from robot vocabulary to safety standards, and now moving to performance standards and so on. So what the future holds, so we will have progressively more and more autonomous robots in personal care. So we are looking not only at the robots acting individually, but also linked up with smart environments, with sensors that monitor health, sensors that monitor behavior of elderly people, and providing a particular type of care in the more complex environments. More of the brain-machine interfaces for prosthetics. We're looking more at not only developing autonomy, but developing better instrumentation, smaller instruments, more fit for purpose, rather than just changing and adapting the existing robotic arms. New generation of robotic surgery with more compact or more anthropomorphic and better interfaced systems for the surgeon. this is much, much wider, and the whole medical robotic area is out of the scope that I can talk about all of that, but there is much effort in many other, in orthopedic surgery, small robots that can be swallowed, that can monitor intestines, small nanorobots that can be sent to target specific tissue, and so on. So, what are the specific challenges? There are a lot of challenges that are related to development and regulations. The standards as such still don't exist, especially the standards that will cover autonomy and some particular robotic functions. So when we look at the new medical devices, there are all the medical device directives, there are IEC standards, but particular functions which are related to some levels of autonomy are not regulated. Also, there is a lot of development to actually test the safety of these devices and get them actually in the operating theaters. So specific challenges with technology development is that what we have in the research labs and what we do is not still at the level which is proof of concept that is interesting for the industry. And UK industry certainly lags behind other industries in Europe in terms of use of robots or development of robots. So we need more, there is a definitely need for more time investment and facility investment in the labs so that we can develop proof of concept that can be interested for industry. So I think still the technology readiness levels for many new concepts, and there are many new concepts in the labs, is still not there. The high investments are related to developments, but also for regulatory standards. So even the companies that have robotics expertise will be reluctant to go into medical because of all the regulatory problems and certifications that are required. There is also adoption from the users, both from the clinicians. So when we develop a new surgical device and when we talk to clinicians, that has to be faster, it has to be fast and faster than what they have at the moment. It has to be accurate, and that has to be acceptable for their use. So if it's not accepted by medics, it is not going to reach the operating theaters. There is also adoption of the, let's say, personal care robots for elderly people. So it is also still not quite tested how all these new machines will affect the people and their long-term use. There are also issues about potential misuse. So what if we leave the robots with them, what are the consequences? There is a lack of standards. There are legal problems, so liability, responsibility, especially in the surgical domain. Who is going to be? So this is nothing new for NHS. I mean, legal problems are quite common. So where is this responsibility moving if we have semi-autonomous, autonomous, pre-controlled robots? Even today, you can find that there is quite a lot of new lawsuits, for instance, for a Da Vinci robot. So when it goes wrong, the patients will first go and blame the robot and the robotic company. So is it the robotic company? Is it the surgeon who's doing something wrong? That is going to have to be defined. And then with all this technology, certainly there will be loss of jobs, or at least shift of jobs, which may be a challenge, but it could be also an opportunity. So there is clear opportunity for development, and there is a lot of developments around. They are not integrated. The stakeholders are not looking towards robotics already. We have developments in the microcontrollers, advanced electronics, advanced manufacturing. There is much more scope in sensors for biosensors, sensors for monitoring, sensors for processing algorithms, and so on. Again, new market potentials and education. So we need new skills, and the new skills has to be trained. For this, we are having now a number of new postgraduate courses in robotics. We also now have doctoral training centers in robotics. And still we have more overseas students than home students. Reason being probably that we don't have enough robotics industry in UK. So the new service paradigms for healthcare can be opened with also providing services and products which are more tailored, personalized to specific needs and specific circumstances, also for surgery, opening of new devices and even new control algorithms are something that is going to make a new shift in healthcare. So I think this is everything.